All right, we're back with another edition of SVG on the Gridiron. We're digging deep into in-venue production and what the NFL teams are up to during this really, really weird season in 2020. So we have a good friend of SVG here, a longtime supporter. He also took part in this year's Venue Summit. He is Eric Long, VP of Content and Production with the Philadelphia Eagles. Eric, how you doing, man? How's the team and how's the city of brotherly love?
Doing great, Christian. So far it's been a little bit of a slower start to the season I think we hoped for, but still optimistic that there's a lot of football left. And as we sit here today, we're half a game out of the division. So, there's always hope as long as you're still in the mix.
Right. NFC East is always a circus. As a Giants fan, I know very much so how weird of a division we have. But good to hear that everything's going well with your team, not so much on the field, but that's a different matter. Eric, we'll start back with training camp. No preseason, unfortunately. Usually guys use those games to kind of rev up your content and get everyone comfortable before the regular season starts. None of that this year. But you guys still did some cool stuff during training camp. Start from the beginning, what you guys did to kind of set the table before the year.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. It's the kind of the ebb and flow of the NFL season, right? Like really end of July is almost always where we start our ramp up because you're going into training camp and then preseason games, as you pointed out, and our team does all the production. We do everything in-house for our preseason games. So it's usually a really heavy lift. It was definitely, on one hand, from a revenue standpoint, obviously the preseason games are huge in terms of how important they are for the organization. So while on one hand, that lift not being something we had to take care of, maybe from a day-to-day standpoint, made life a little easier. Really pretty quickly from there, what it became is how do we maintain that revenue and make sure that we're still, we have opportunities to have our sponsors incorporated into content. And how are we making good on some of that stuff? So maybe while the preseason games weren't as big of a lift, the focus shifted then to how we could use training camp and the content that we were creating throughout that period of time to help. So, fortunately, I think we had a lot of time between the draft and the end of July there to kind of plan and get ready. So we really hit the ground running in the way that the league, same thing. My counterparts across the league were dealing with. We had a very specific structure with kind of week by week, the ramp up period for the players and when they were arriving and the periods of time before they practiced, where it was more off the field stuff and then into practice. So we actually were able to conduct, first kind of right off the bat, a little mini version of a media day shoot. So we were really strategic with who we included from the roster. So we did not do the entire team. And actually we kind of structured it so that it was very similar to the things we did last year. That way everything would match. So we targeted, any new acquisitions, draft picks, guys who had number changes or, any other maybe more significant roles, than they had last year. And that was a 2-day process that we were able to kind of conduct with our staff here. Because of the way that the league kind of set it up, we were also shooting for some of the TV networks. We were taking care of things like AP headshots, trying to satisfy a lot of different platforms with essentially 7 people was what we were able to have there doing it. So everybody wearing a lot of hats, kind of moving things around, but it was really successful, went really well. Got a lot of really good stuff. And then from there, really kind of moved into the actual training camp period. So, a big part of our programming throughout that period of time was daily practice live streams. Normally we have a small amount of fans that are able to be here and attend training camp in person. We always have training camp at our facility, or at least have for the last 5 years. So, some of the focus became how do we try our best, knowing that it wasn't going to be exactly the same, to still provide a really solid experience for people. So every day of the players are on the field, we streamed the first portion of practice, usually ended up being about 20-30 minutes long. And we added things like live commentary to that, multiple camera angles. It was a 3-camera show that we punched, and we built out storylines and treated it just like we would, almost like an event at the stadium.
Right.
And I think, pretty successful overall. We saw a lot of good numbers, people tuning into that. Also did a lot of daily studio programming. So some interviews with players, recaps of what was happening on the field. Again, had to get a little creative with how that content was created and how, who could be in the studio, and essentially splitting our staff up to divide and conquer everything. But we got through it and, did a lot of really cool stuff that I think we're pretty proud of. And then we're able to kind of maintain some of that as we moved into the regular season. I mean, honestly, a lot of the content strategy kind of became about, how do you maintain the things that you do well and try to make the most of it? How do you adapt the things that maybe you can't do in the same way, but still there's a way to kind of accomplish a similar idea. And then honestly, it was kind of like, how do we lean into it as much as possible and use it as an opportunity to be more efficient? I think we cleaned up some things that we were doing from a content perspective that maybe didn't make as much sense, and now we just couldn't do. So it made it a lot easier to say, all right, well, let's move on from that. And then, it's interesting because I think some of the things being able to do more virtual, and now that, I think your staff is a lot more accustomed to things like jumping on a Zoom meeting, right? In the past, it was kind of like if people were pulled in different directions, they would just miss meetings or couldn't be part of it. But it was a lot easier actually to keep that communication flow going and make sure that we were using our time the best we possibly can. So that's, kind of a lot there, but I feel like that's kind of from camp as we got into the regular season, that was a lot of kind of like what the mindset here was and what we were working hard on.
Right. We'll talk a little bit of how those virtual workflows are still being used for your team later on after a game day. But training camp turns to regular season. You got game days. I went to school in Philadelphia. Sundays are just different. Mondays are just different. Thursdays are just different down in South Philly near Lincoln Financial. But unfortunately, at the time of this recording, still no fans. But talk to me a little bit about what you guys are still doing in the venue and inside the stadium, but also doing stuff for the fans at home that still bleed green for the Eagles.
Yeah, great question. So first, we were lucky that we didn't open at home because I was able to watch all my colleagues across the league work through the Kinks on week one. Yeah. Kind of joking around with a couple friends. Abby from the Patriots and Liz from the Broncos and Alan from the Vikings, and they all opened at home week one, and I kind of, hey, just let me know how it goes. They're like, we hate you. But so after being able to kind of watch how that played out, it did help. So I'll take it. And now we've had two home games. We played at home weeks 2 and 3. So first, from kind of the in-stadium experience, I mean, it's definitely, and having watched some of the interviews you've done with some of my colleagues, there's not a whole lot that's very different here. We're working within kind of what the league is allowing. And now, it's interesting looking from week 2. Week 2, we were kind of under the same audio rules where we had this ambient crowd bed that had to be at 70 decibels and you could play your music at 75 decibels. And honestly, it was a tough environment, and I appreciate actually respect the league being open to reassessing that and making some changes, because it was tough. It was quiet. Right. It felt like there was no life in the building. And of course, without fans, that's going to be part of it. But the volumes were just so low that it just it was like, whoa, this doesn't feel like football. So from week 2 to week 3, the league opened things up, which was awesome. And, we were able to set our decibel level for our ambient sound. They gave us a range to work within. So we were on the high end of that range, and definitely brought a little more life to the bowl. And then they took all the restrictions off of the levels that we could have our music and our PA at. So we were able to bring that volume up a lot. And, it really, yes, it felt a lot more like a football game. Of course, still wasn't the same without the fans, but it definitely wasn't what it was the week before. So a market improvement there, and as we kind of look ahead, at some point, I think we're cautiously optimistic that it'll be safe to have some group of fans in the stands, and very closely, watching the developments with other teams in the Northeast, because that's kind of, how we most closely compare, I guess, in terms of like, what the situations are and the infection rates and things like that. And of course, working with the state and the city. So, hopefully soon, we're in a situation where we've got some people in the bowl and everything's safe. As we work towards that, we're definitely planning so that we're ready to go, right? We don't want to be caught in a situation where we find out and then it's like, oh, now what do we do?
Right.
So we've got a committee here in the organization that's been very proactive in talking to other teams and monitoring best practices and working at how we can use, speaking really from the content side of things, how we can use our channels to communicate that message whenever the time comes and make sure people understand, what the restrictions are and what the protocols are that they'll need to adhere to. So that's all taking place now. I'm really excited for when that happens. And then the second part of your question is, in terms of looking at like what we're doing for fans at home, we spent a lot of time over the last several years trying to build out a really robust experience for our fans at home. And a lot of that honestly was driven by our fan base is of course, we've got a very heavy regional fan base, but we've got a lot of fans that are throughout the nation and even throughout the world. So, an initiative for us a couple of years ago, we kind of took on this viewpoint of like, how do we bring the best to equals everywhere? And so we build out a pretty good game center offering where if you're on our site or our app on game days, we're aggregating the best of our social feeds and highlights and kind of providing commentary and in some cases, additional context for things that are happening. So of course it's not meant to be a replacement for being in the stadium. There's nothing quite like being in the stadium on a game day. But the idea was that if you're watching from afar and you feel disconnected or you don't have access to the game in your market, that we can still keep you plugged in and kind of give you some of the flavor and bring you the best stuff. So honestly, from that perspective, we didn't really change much this year. We really just kind of took what we were doing and built on it a little bit more. But we felt like we had a really good offering there already. And we do a full half-hour pregame show on our social and site. And then we do a full, hour and 15 post-game show that's really built around our post-game press conferences with coach and the players and things like that. So just really look to enhance all that stuff and build on top of it. And, so far I feel like that stuff's gone pretty well in all things considered.
Great. So Sunday or Monday or Thursday, whenever you guys are playing, that day passes, and then it's the lead up to the next week. You mentioned a lot about the virtual workflows that you guys established during training camp, but that's still playing a factor this year in terms of keeping everyone social distance and COVID-19 related things with safety protocols. What are some of those virtual workflows that you guys are still using, and how is the layout in terms of who's allowed to be in person at the facility, who's going to be working at home, and what's happening during the midweek?
We're in a situation where we've got about half of our total staff for our department that's back in the building here and has been since July. On a given day, we're probably like 10 to 12 people here in person. And then within that, the group of people that are here, about half of that group is in tier 2 and has a little more access to the building, and half of that group is in tier 3 and has pretty restricted access in terms of where they can go. Honestly, a lot of the things that they can access that's really helpful for us is workstations that are here on our SAN and then our studio so that we can produce content out of the studio space. So, on a given week, we're still taking those virtual workflows, as you mentioned, and we're using them within the building. So we'll have our talent in a studio across the building from our football ops side of the building, where we've got a small studio that we built. We actually built 3 spaces that are essentially, little 8x10 rooms that have, a robotic camera and a return monitor and a speaker and a boom mic and a monitor behind the person so that we can swap out the backdrop. But then they can communicate directly, just like you and I are right now, with our talent back in the studio. But the great part of that is we can control, there's no latency. We're on our own network here. So It's really solid connectivity. We were able to do it with things, I guess one thing that was really important to us, and not judging any teams that decided to go ahead this way for whatever reason, but we didn't want it to be laptops, right? We didn't want to be sticking laptops in rooms and be driving off of webcams alone. So we wanted to kind of take the same idea, because there's a lot of efficiencies in this type of, being able to connect, but we wanted to do it with high-end equipment, so that way it still maintained the quality that we were used to and looked and sounded great. And, wasn't, you don't run into the same things where there's hiccups or, latency or stuff that drives you nuts as a viewer, where you're like, oh my goodness, I can't take any more of this. So that's essentially how we kind of engineered things. And now we're able we do a daily studio show, kind of wrapping up news. We have podcasts, multiple podcasts every single day, interviews that we're doing with head coach, with players. We're facilitating actually all of the media availability for our PR staff. So essentially come up with a workflow that, allows us to do a virtual press conference room. And that's all built out of the same spaces as well. So been really happy about how all that's kind of worked out, all things considered. And honestly, the only issue we've had is just, there's never enough rooms. I think, NFL media, you're used to be able to have locker room access, right? And there's scrums and you can talk to multiple players, and it's not like that anymore. So it's a lot more, there's less players every day, and it's all staggered so that it's not happening at the same time. There's some good things that come out of that too, though, because I think it's the quality of those conversations is probably better, right? Like we're able to record and have everything. From our standpoint, we were never able to capture all of that, previously, because there's just so much going on at one time. now we're able to centralize it all. So if you go to our website, you can basically see and hear everything that took place in the building that day. So, from a fan perspective, I think that's probably a little bit better of an experience, but we're making the most of it.
It's always good to look at it better than what you think it would be. You're thinking of always on the optimism. I mean, that's who you are, Eric. If you watch the summit, you're the optimist of the panel, and you're continuing it. I love it. This is the last question, but want to ask you this before you go. Shout outs to the team, or just in general, how proud you are to work on this staff and work with the incredible individuals that you do on a day in and day out.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of people to shout out. First and foremost, I mean, talking to you here today, Kristian, like you guys have done a tremendous job throughout this period of time, keeping everybody connected. Really, it's funny because again, if you're kind of looking at the bright side of things, I think the amount of content you guys have been able to offer to the SVG community has probably been more, because everybody's so used to doing these virtual things now. It's not like, we're beholden to whenever we get together in person and have those conversations. So, it's been awesome to check in with you guys and see all this great stuff that's happening and all these case studies. Organizationally, a lot of really, really great people that I work with, my staff. David Sullivan, our engineer. I feel like every time I have an SVG conversation, I'm bringing his name up, but he's the brains behind the operation here and really bringing everything to life. We have Alessandra Lane and Kelly Rafferty on our scoreboard staff from a venue perspective that have really kind of made that show what it is. And then a lot of other people throughout the team, our director of production, Stacey Kelleher, our director of social media, Samantha Wood, our director of technology, Tamay Patel, all have been really key leaders on the group and helping to kind of figure this thing out and drive it forward. That's really important. And then our leadership here, our ownership, Jeffrey Lurie, our team president, Don Smolensky, and my boss, our senior vice president of media marketing, Jen Kavanaugh, all have been tremendously supportive. It's always been about how do we find ways to do things, not all the reasons why we can't do things. And I think it's so important, you touched on the optimism part, but like, really, I think, we have an opportunity here to take the hand that we're dealt and make the most of it. And I do think, long-term, there's going to be some really positive things that come out of this because we've been able to just understand how to look at things much differently than we ever would have had we not been forced to. From a game presentation standpoint, it's always going to be better when there's fans in the building. Right. No doubt about it, right? Like, I'm not going to lobby for ambient crowd noise tracks for good.
You're not?
No, I think that one's pretty easy to look at and say, yeah, that's not what we want to do. But when it all comes down to, I think, we want to make sure everybody's safe. That's the most important thing first and foremost, and going about it in the right way. So a lot of the energy that's we've spent on trying to figure out solutions for these things. That's where I think, it's a credit to everybody involved to just find a way to make it happen and to make sure that we're just doing the best we can.
First and foremost, you guys are doing great work. I've had the chance to meet some of your coworkers, very nice individuals, and even better, hardworking individuals in the booth. And secondly, thank you for the kind words. SVG is always here to serve you guys. So it's just a small thing we can do during these great times. But Eric, that being said, good luck the rest of the way. Hopefully the team gets better. It's hard for me to say as a New York native, but you guys make it hard for me to not like you when you're a friend like this. But yep, stay safe, stay healthy. Hope to see you soon. And thanks for the time, man.
Thanks a lot, Kristian.